Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential, your weekly fix of all things royal, brought to you from Mail HQ right here in Kensington. I'm Jo Elvin. Now, lots to talk about this week, but let's start with the big talking point. That is what we're calling here on Palace Confidential the royal name blame game. That is the row, of course, over Lilibet, the name chosen by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex for their new baby daughter. The palace seemed to be fighting back. To recap, sources close to Harry claimed that he had asked his granny if he could use her private nickname for his daughter. And then palace sources rebutted this claim, telling the Mail on Sunday that it wasn't an asking, it was a telling. Kate Mansey is the journalist behind the latest story, and she's brought us up to speed.
Sources really well placed have told me that there's a shift happening now. There was anger at the palace about what was coming out of America, particularly with relation to a private conversation between Harry and his grandmother. As one insider told me, it was a telling, not an asking, during that conversation. So when these articles appeared in the US media, on these very well-read, well-respected websites, that was something that really irked the palace, and the Queen was not happy. Speaking to the BBC about such a story was kind of a masterstroke from the palace's point of view. We don't know the BBC source on this, but certainly they were very convinced with the authority of the source for it to run news bulletins the whole day long. So that's a rare point in and of itself. When the palace then was asked about the BBC story, they refused to deny it. They couldn't deny it. And by not denying it, we're essentially corroborating the story. And that was a really interesting shift. I think this is very much a shot across the bows for the Sussex's spin machine. I think, will they jump on every little thing? No. But when it relates to the heart of what the Queen has said in a conversation, absolutely. They are not going to stand for facts or mistruths, as I was told, being represented in the global media.
Well, joining me in the studio to discuss all the royal news today are the diary editors for the Mail on Sunday and the Daily Mail, respectively. What a pedigree pair we have. We have Charlotte Griffiths and Richard Eden. Welcome to you both. But before we get our teeth into this, a recent statement from the Sussexes says the Duke spoke with his family in advance of the announcement. In fact, his grandmother was the first family member he called. During that conversation, he shared their hope of naming their daughter Lilibet in her honour. Had she not been supportive, they would not have used the name. Charlotte, coming to you first. There was no asking, but also no telling. We got sharing, that very American term.
Yeah.
What's your interpretation of that sort of language?
Oh, sharing's such a clever American term, isn't it? My theory is that he must have said something along the lines of, we're going to name her in honour of you, Granny, or we're going to name her Lily in honour of you. But he didn't really say, and now is your moment to reject this. That's my theory. Did he make it clear that this was actually a decision-making conversation? I don't know. He might have just been saying, hey, Granny, we got this great idea.
Richard, coming to you, though, since the big Oprah explosive interview, we've speculated a lot about whether or not the Queen and the palace will start to fight back with their version of the truth, their truths about things. But are you surprised that this seems to have been the issue where we've got more comment from the palace?
Well, I think it was always going to happen. It was just a question of when and what was the spark for it. But frankly, I'm pleased that the Queen is fighting back. I think the palace has always had this policy of never complain, never explain. But that's fine when you're dealing with newspaper stories and speculation. That makes sense. But when you've got your own grandson and his wife, peddling these stories, talking about conversations which you've just had, it becomes untenable. I think the palace is right that they have to then respond, and it is, it's such a radical change. It sort of takes your breath away in some ways, but I really do think the Queen is right with this one.
And how do you think, Charlotte, that Harry is interpreting that move? Do you think he's a bit rattled by it? Do you think you'll see it as a bit of a warning shot?
How could you not? I mean, when the Queen lays down the law, you've got to be a bit rattled. And he does know how all of this works. Meghan maybe didn't. He should have explained, if not. But he actually has been here for many years. And unless he's suddenly forgotten, this is how the game works. And he knows that better than anyone.
And it's interesting, that very careful use of words that Harry and Meghan came back with, that we've just heard. Because that seemed to me a sort of acknowledgement that perhaps a different spin had been put on that conversation first, and they had to row back from that.
Isn't it extraordinary to think that somewhere in Montecito, people were thinking that maybe this baby naming would bring the family together and heal this rift, and it seems to have just made it even worse.
Yeah. Every new thing they do is like another lob from across the Atlantic.
That's all we have for you on our YouTube show. But to see the rest of this episode, including some more fascinating royal revelations, head to www.mailplus.co.uk/royals or click the link on screen now.